Harvard Divinity School.
Uses and abuses of power in alternative spiritualities. Implications for spiritual care of patients and communities.
April 26th, 2023.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Destiny. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone at Harvard for this opportunity to talk to you about what I think is really one of the kernels of many different faiths. I'd also like to thank people at Crossbones over the years who have helped me come up with this. This is a kind of systematic paratheology, I guess, developed prayerfully over the process of half a decade. So thank you, John Crow. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Andrew Nunn at Southwark Cathedral. I wish I could smell you all, but the reckless hate of US immigration has meant that here I am dissociating quietly on Zoom in my room on the outskirts of Exeter near a stone circle. But silver linings, thank God for Zoom. So I've timed this talk and it's 21 minutes, if that's okay. I hope it's not too much longer with my dramatic pauses and flourishes and stuff, but I'll just begin now. So a powerful institution saying sorry for the historic abuses of power. This is an all too infrequent occurrence. It's ever rarer if the atrocities now regretted were committed the best part of a millennium previously. In Southwark's Crossbones graveyard, the local Anglican cathedral church now process every Mary Magdalene Day in all pomp and ceremony to commit an liturgical act of regret, remembrance, and restoration for wrongdoings committed by the church. And it was local pagans that made this happen. Here exists a group spirituality which both memorializes the mistreatment of sex workers while also lifting up the traumatized outcasts on whose shoulders we are all seen to stand and with whose should nots we are constantly revolved. I'd like to offer a content and trigger warning for elements of the history that I'm about to disclose. This presentation offers an insider view of the spirituality of these Abraham pagans, myself included, in contemporary Southwark. This is a spirituality couched in history, mystery, psychogeography, and ritual poetry. And Shelley Rambo's trauma theology helps to elucidate our understanding here. Here is death in life, memory as witness, the pneumatology of Holy Saturday, the not quite being sure, and the inclusion of what is cast out. In terms of the structure of this talk, firstly, I'll look at the historic abuses of power, which provide both the fire of protest and the kernel for remembrance. And then I will analyze the visionary text, providing the mythical backdrop to this group, which was performed in the Globe Theatre on Shakespeare's birthday in the millennium year and in the Cathedral Church as well in 2010. How's my sound? Is it good? Cool. The vigils, which occur on the 23rd of every month, together with the aforementioned act on Mary Magdalene Day, confirm the presence of what I will term eschatological empowerment. So first, let's look to the history. Historically, the Bishop of Winchester licensed many of the brothels in Southwark near his palace. Just picture Southwark, right? In London, bear pits, brothels, gambling dens, theatres, all illegal. But in Southwark, they were allowed. That's where people came to have fun and to do their sinning. This was under what was called the liberty of the clink, an ironic reference to the local prison. So this locale of fun and sin was the ferment of the Elizabethan playwrights. And while the Bishop of Winchester could be called upon by the Winchester geese, as they came to be known, as the defender of their liberty, in his ordinances he details that they shouldn't be beaten, that they should be allowed to come and go as they please, they can't be pimped. According to a historian writing very near the time, 40 years after the closure of the brothels by Henry VIII. Even though he could be relied upon in life and was indeed a business partner in life, his abuse of power came at the exact point when these women were the most powerless to stop his choice. When their corpus was cold, the bishop buried them in church-owned, yet unconsecrated ground in a single women's burial pit. This soteriological scandal is what inspires the group to meet. Unable to inhibit the decision of a powerful institution which had protected them in life, these sex workers were destined, in medieval psychogeographic terms, for condemnation, damnation, hell. But now comes the mystery. On the 23rd of November 1996, a local playwright and poet, John Constable, claimed contact from a ghost of this place, the Goose, and he channeled several poems describing in depth the interiority of trauma, poverty, sex work, sexual empowerment, and sexual abuse. While the emancipatory force of the words are of more importance than mere geographic facticity, it may be haunting to note that weeks later, the underground line, the Jubilee line, happened to be digging into the place of the vision spot to penetrate the area with electricity pylons, and there they discovered an estimated 15,000 human skeletons, dense and crushed, most of whom children. Are after women. Crossbones, hello?
We can hear
Have I
you
just
again.
cut
You
out?
cut out for a minute.
All good, yeah. Where did you lose me?
Children.
Okay, yeah. So most of these 15,000 skeletons were children, and thereafter, women. So it was women and children that were discovered. So Crossbones graveyard had thus was seen to be rediscovered as much through the accident of infrastructural development as through psychogeographic channeling. The Goose is believed to have returned to provide the inspiration for a meta-modern contratext and mystery play, the Southwark Mysteries, an inspiration without expiration date which continues to breathe life into community meetings at the graveyard. Far beyond literary trope or plot device, the Goose is seen to guard, protect, and honor all outcasts, the homeless, the abused, the departed. A series of visionary poems within a medieval style mystery play, The Mysteries imagines Judgment Day in Southwark, when all time has become now. Its realized eschatology, that is, death, judgment, heaven and hell here in our lives today, comes as a transgressive soteriology in the sense of who does the saving, which casts, for example, a Cockney and homeless Jesus interacting with the Goose or Oliver Cromwell or members of other religions in this 21st century metropolis. For in these visions, the Goose is the bride of Christ, a co-judge of judgment itself at a moment when God, man, and beast are communing for one moment in eternity. To quote, its themes are glocal and perennial, cosmic and particular, narrativizing eternal problems of theodicy through real-world dynamics of power abuse. Beggar Jesus swears in the vomit and beer. Yahweh and Satan engage in a rap battle at war with their shadow, while the Goose looks on during empowering soliloquies, saying, I am a tricksy tart, dear. My aim is to astonish you. In her innovative Theology of Trauma, Shelley Rambo maintains that trauma is the suffering that does not go away. The study of trauma is the study of what remains. Much of narrative theology is preoccupied with real-time retribution, the vanquishing of dark forces, the happy ending, in no want of a cleaner term, Rambo looks instead to the chaos of Holy Saturday, when the individual lives of the whole Jesus movement were thrown into disarray, torment, and unremitting doubt regarding everything that had been said and done. An over-focus on the utopia of resurrection, Rambo argues, can render the Christian message shallower than when the unsure Saturday is meditated upon and dwelt honestly within. This is to play more than the logical game that hope is more real in the box of potential, and rather to say the potency of real pain is never wholly undone. Complete reversal is cheap grace, is fantasy. Commenting on the theologian of theodrama, Hans-Urs von Balthasar, Rambo rambles on. For Balthasar, she says, the divine story must exceed a story of tragedy and survival. It must be theologically rescued from abyss. But what if theologians did not perform this rescue? Perhaps the divine story is neither a tragic one nor a triumphant one, but in fact a story of divine remaining, the story of love that survives. It is a cry arising from the abyss. The question is, can we witness it? End quote. The Southwark Mysteries witnesses the abuses of power of the church, and at the same time emancipates the animal power which motivates its fear. I'll quote from the Mysteries now, a beautiful section. Let them see, them that sell their time to earn a daily crust to feed a family, them that trade the future in stocks and bonds or speculate in property, them that crunch the numbers on the number crunching North Bank in the old city, then flood back across London Bridge to take their trains to Gravesend and the estuary. Let them see. In the hungry eyes of debtors doing time with Dickens' father in Marshalsea, the denizens of Bedlam now entrusted to the care of our community, the homeless in the subway, the dead-end kids from Old Kent Road to Bermondsey, in the skull-faced queers and junkies and the tart who tested positive for HIV, the shining eyes of our goddess of mercy. In the haggard face of John Crow, who watches from his high tower in Trinity, as in the single mother who lives across the road at number 23, the checkout girl at Superdrug, whose name tag says her name is Charity, and in every human face, what is pocked and scarred by what we call reality. By the grace of Our Lady, Mary Ovary, let them see the shining eyes of our goddess of mercy. This description of the despised and dejected does more than merely humanize what the city rush steps over and avoids. It activates, energizes, empowers these downtrodden. Mary Ovary, the matron saint of the cathedral, is invoked as the protectress of ferrymen, gamblers, beggars, actors, and harlots. Let them see, strains the listener, let them see what? And as the concatenating cavalcade reaches its nadir zenith in the HIV epidemic, the goose reveals simple mercy. The Mysteries expose the continual ontology of trauma as haunting and ghostly, as incorporated into the identity of personality and place, and as able to change. But such metanoia goes further than catharsis. It is the healing grace of moments when trauma is understood in agential terms, situated in particular places and at particular times. The honest recognition is that sea change revelations often require something external or external seeming to us, to approach us, to move us. There is something that it is like not to be me, with all my hang-ups, judgments, tendencies, and yet that subjectivity is just as real as my own. The goose is uninterested in a continual blame game with ecclesial hierarchy, but in synthesis, in syncretism, acceptance, peace, as when Satan asks Yahweh, "How come you're always at war with your shadow?" Nevertheless, that even the trauma of creation is totally created by a good God remains a real confusion. It is when we forget that our being me is their being them, that I am your other you, that cruelty happens. Quoting from the Mysteries, "I am the white noise of a nervous system. I am the silence in which it reroutes. I am the gods and the men who resist them. The darkness in the eyes of the men in suits. I am in George, I must conquer my dragon. I am in Martha, I nurse the red gash. I am Hag Keridwen with her red raw rag on. I am Kali, razor in the dash and slash. I'll be anything you would have me be. I'll be Mary Magdalene washing your feet if it helps you see through what divides you from me." Theological notions of absolute good and evil, of original sin, are simply stated and then pragmatically and ironically complexified by real-world examples, as for instance, when the pilgrim Jack Shepherd leaves the goose with his silver blade gleaming, or when newborns have to be dumped in Thames water dreaming. The church's pathologization of extramarital sexual desire is given a heart-rending exploration and critique, and the goose reminds us that the dream of the skin remains a game of opportunity for joy rather than a prison of temptation. The creation sequence at the beginning of the play sets the paradox by intoning a protest when Eve asks, "Did I fall? Or was I pushed?" This is as much a question about entity encounters generally as it is about who has the real power to judge the morality of sex work. Does fate tempt us or us fate? Is the incorporation of a character outside of one's own a passive or an active process? That sex work is rarely a first choice, but motivated in the vast majority of cases by poverty, is not enough to desecrate the act. This brings with it implications of theodicy. Can the notions of an omnipotent and omnibenevolent divinity be justified in the face of a cruel world which uses its power to disenfranchise? A world where the competition for space and pleasure is too rarely and glimmeringly replaced by the overflowing grace of mutual desire. The goose, as a discarnate spirit of flesh, alerts us to the fact that a theological blame game, in this case of sexual mores and habits, which all too often result from a trauma which is externally imposed, merely continues the very evil which it seeks to condemn. Divinity is witness to trauma suffered, and judgment is powerless without experience. Exterior measurements of what is done or not done, and what ought to be done about that, are ultimately powerless to the inner horizon of what it is to love and be loved. And so the goose is the judge of judges, the depth of reality which gossip's shallows encircle, yet cannot match or reach, the voice crying out in the wilderness of our hearts. So now I've talked about the history and the mystery, I'll quickly go into praxis. How am I doing for time?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, cool. So in the memorial enactments of local people, the goose is a redemptive haunt. So for example, when Satan asks Jesus, "Who would want such a pearl fouled and festered in the Thames mud?" Jesus says, "I would want such a pearl. It's washed clean with my blood." Satan says, I don't believe I'm hearing this. Jesus Christus, when he's not Deus Ex Machina, he's Deus Sadomasochismus. Jesus responds, art thou the accuser, that self-same child abuser who seeks but to shackle these spirits in sin, doomed to dwell in dread and doubt of the God you looked without, to whom I now reveal the God within? So at the actual vigils, this the goose is a redemptive haunt, a power to be reckoned with precisely for her original giving up of power. This Christic pagan spirit is seen as preventing the physical high-rise development on top of the graveyard. She is first witness to the resurrection in a time when women couldn't be witnesses. She is a Mary Magdalene energy, apostle to the apostles. And locals come to this spirit for support, for succor, for someone who listens to and feels through and witnesses their trauma, who provides catharsis to continued crises of abuse and powerlessness in the present day. Tears are frequently shed at vigils as ribbons are tied to the gates in embodied acts of binding and loosing, and social outcasts in this way are recast into the story. This complex pneumatology of trauma can be seen again through Shelley Rambo's elucidation, a spirit which occupies a more tenuous position between life and death. Death is neither completed nor in the past, and life is neither new nor directed towards the future. We intone the prayer poem, the echo poem. Here lay your hearts, your flowers, your book of hours, your fingers, your thumbs, your miss you mums. Here hang your hopes, your dreams, your might have beens, your locks, your keys, your mysteries. And then we give offerings. They might be historic tidbits of research. They might be statements of loved ones who have died recently. But it's always tinged with passion and palimpsest, with synchronicity and spontaneity, with vigor and valence and tears and truth. The time of year will be relevant. So on St. George's Day, we emancipate the dragon. We celebrate pagan festivals and Christian festivals hand in hand. Professor Sandra Hausner, our first ethnographer, has described these as rituals of rebellion, which transcend the standard anthropological splitting of rites into cohesive versus divisive, rites which bring the socius into greater unity and rites which function to define and exclusivize group loyalties. And although some have viewed these two things as dialectical because ritual proclaims alterity as it consolidates community, Crossbones, conversely even to this, advocates a larger, more expansive social order, which includes the thorn rather than excludes or tries to pluck it out. And what results is an accordion motion where, according to Hausner, and I agree with her, the periphery and its formerly oppositional center find a way to act together as a revitalized social unit of their own, sometimes in opposition to a larger center still. For example, high-rise development, sexual abuse, disenchantment, gentrification, and consumerism. Okay, I'll try to wrap up now. Thank you for letting me know. So Abraham Joshua Heschel once wrote that within our awe, we only know that all we own, we owe. And it is in precisely moments of possession and religious experience generally that a question is asked. How and when is it most empowering to give up that power? For the being beyond whom there is no power, the logic that the most powerful thing for an omnipotent being to do is to give up power confronts us deeply in this vision of community. It represents also the kernel of Christian theology, from the incarnation to the kenosis, from the enfleshment to the self-emptying. When trauma runs through the cracks of time, deep into a particular place, the community at Crossbones answer this by honoring deeply the truths of historic and continued power abuse, to commune with the spirits around the block and to listen to what they might have to say, in the words of our first ethnographer. Rather than institutionalizing the outcast or turning the outcast into a heritage theme park, outcasts are cast into the story. And so the acerbic eschatology of the powerful institution morphs into the instituent power of the story from within the end time. While the goose is the spirit of our sexually liberated times, her entity has yet emerged from a global past to remind us and all who listen to the dark sides of aspersion, money, hierarchy, desire, judgment, consent, and to the dialogic of repression and integration when sensing the animal who strains inside human life. Thank you.
Sponsored by the Program for the Evolution of Spirituality.
Copyright 2023, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.